All right, so while I waited for this to upload, I was researching facials also for my friend, and then I got, selfish and looked for myself. And it's the ultimate. It combines the vaping shops with the facials. You can get a CBD facial, apparently. So there we go. Differentiation, right? So the facial shop needs to do something different. This is what they're doing, monopolistically competitive. So what does this mean? Means for the particular spa or whatever I saw this at, it means that they're probably earning zero economic profit in the long run. Now, is this bad? No, that's why we spent so long talking about economic profit, right? You're still making a positive accounting profit. You're covering your next best option. So they're like earning a salary. It's just if there's too much profit in the facial industry, other firms are going to enter, demand will drop. All right, so moving on. So implications of product differentiation. The differentiated nature of products in a monopolistically competitive market implies that firms must continually convince consumers that their products are better. So with a perfectly competitive firm, right, you're making corn. You make corn, right? You don't have any say over price. There's a lot of competition. The only thing you have control over is how much you produce and your marginal costs, right? You can maybe get a new tractor or something. This is different. You've got to constantly innovate. You've got to constantly convince consumers that your product is different, which is exactly what I'm doing, right? I'm looking at all these spas in town. They're all a little bit different. So in general, the demand for an individual firm's products is less elastic when consumers do not see competitors as having close substitutes. And if it's less elastic or more inelastic, then your profit tends to be higher. So I have my example here of Fluid Coffee in downtown Valpo. Joe mentioned Rise and Roll Bakery, and now I'm curious if that is an Indiana chain, because that's another great example. It's this bakery that makes donuts, and I think it's Amish owned, but it's differentiation, right? Because it's like all these different types of donuts. So anyway, I can't eat there. I can't eat donuts. So if we go to this place that I'm talking about. So it's called a coffee bar. So when you walk in there, it legit feels like you're in a bar. And like the people who work there have tattoos, and there's like loud music playing. And then they don't call them drinks, they call them concoctions. So like they've got something called a lemon love, right? So it's cold brew coffee with lemon extract and all of this stuff. Product differentiation, right? They're trying to differentiate themselves from the other places in town. Another thing they do is they do offer gluten-free food, which is an example of something we're going to talk about. I'm a niche consumer. I'm looking for that, and that's something that they do. So product differentiation, it's really interesting to see. You're going to be driving around town, you're going to see a repair shop, and it's going to say free estimates if your check engine light is on. They're trying to differentiate themselves. One of them used to say Ladies' Day for oil changes, Tuesdays, right? So as a woman, I'm like, hey, I'll go there. There's going to be other women there. All right, so implications of product differentiation. All right. There are two strategies monopolistically competitive firms use to persuade consumers. The first one is comparative advertising. So again, if you can convince consumers your product is different enough, your demand curve becomes more inelastic. Also, when other firms enter, you're not going to see your demand curve shift as much, right? So comparative advertising is a form of advertising where a firm attempts to increase the demand by differentiating its product from the competing brands. Fluid Coffee Shop, differentiated. We have more special cocktails. We have more special coffees. We've got this like cool atmosphere. And then your book talks about how brand equity is the additional value added to the product because of its brand. The book's example is Subway being healthy, right? I don't like fast food restaurants as an example of monopolistic competition because I think they're more of an oligopoly. But still, there's product differentiation. So you see the point. Subway has been able to convince people that it's very healthy. And so that's one way that they're trying to do comparative advertising. Your book also has a nice discussion here about introducing new products. So you'll notice like Subway has a new sandwich, or Crest toothpaste has new and improved, right? This is because it's trying to differentiate. The other example here is niche marketing, a marketing strategy where goods and services are tailored to meet the needs of a particular segment of the market. Your book talks about how green marketing targets consumers who are concerned about environmental issues. But again, I'm a classic example of a niche market because I can't eat gluten. And so Subway recently introduced gluten-free bread, right? Like that's a niche marketing. I'll bring my whole family there. It's the only place I could eat in Alaska, right? When I went there. So that's another type of marketing. So if you can like convince people this is for you, or some of these facial places I'm looking at say, oh, we've got an express service for people who are busy. All right, so successful differentiation and branding strategies can make managers brand myopic. I'm having like flashbacks to when I was in business school, and I feel like a lot of business school was just learning vocabulary, but it was always interesting. Anyway, brand myopic just means you rest on the brand's past laurels instead of focusing on industry trends and changing consumer preferences. So that would be like, I don't know, I'm thinking about, we're doing strategic planning here at Valpo, and so this is something they're trying to avoid. What's happening is people aren't as interested in liberal arts educations anymore. People like you guys are a growing field of adult learners looking to go back to school. People want more flexibility with online education, all of this stuff. So if Valpo was just like, you know what, we're just really good at being a liberal arts school, and didn't really think about it, we might miss opportunities. My husband always talks about people doing that too with graphic design. It really irritates him when an agency is not innovative and when they just like do the same thing over and over again. Not that I would know the difference. All right, and then this is always something that I like to think about, advertising in these different types of industries. So how much should a firm spend on advertising to maximize profits? Now, there is a rule in there. They talk about, in your book, they talk about advertising elasticity. I did not think it was worth our time to do the math, but I still think it's worth talking about the question because it depends on the nature of the industry. So the optimal amount of advertising balances marginal benefits and marginal costs. Now let's think about a perfectly competitive firm. Would they ever advertise? No, there's no marginal benefits, right? They have no say over the price. They can sell as much as they want at the market price. No incentive to do that. Would a monopoly have an incentive to advertise? A lot of people say no, but keep in mind that a monopolist is constrained by the demand curve. So let's say that we assume, I used to call cable companies a monopoly, but they're not anymore, now that we have Netflix and stuff, right? But let's just assume like Xfinity is a monopoly over the cable industry. They would still want to advertise because they still want to increase demand for its products, right? But the company that has the most incentive to advertise is a monopolistically competitive firm, because they, number one, have to differentiate themselves, and number two, have to convince other people that their products are different. So they're the most likely to advertise. With that said, my other textbook, I was teaching in my other textbook today, it did talk about how perfectly competitive firms might want to consider doing this. And I thought of my CSA. So there is this farm in New Carlisle, Indiana, and they have differentiated their products. Even though it might be a perfectly competitive industry, look at this beautiful video, right? They've differentiated their products by making them organic and by having a CSA box, which is, you know, you prepay for the year and then you get produce delivered to you each week. So it's like interesting, right? So a neoclassical economist would be like, a perfectly competitive firm would never advertise. But I do think in some cases, maybe perfect competition isn't the best approximation of this industry anymore, right? Now that we're so concerned with local food and we're concerned with organic food and all of this stuff, we might have more incentive to differentiate yourself, even though we typically think of this as perfectly competitive. So How much do you guys want to bet I get vaping shop ads now that I Googled that? We're at the point of the semester that we're just kind of resting on our laurels, aren't we? We knew all of this stuff. We knew demand, we knew marginal revenue, we knew marginal cost, we knew optimal decision making, we know deadweight loss. The only difference in this market is that we see the individual firm demand curve shift as we move from the short run to the long run. So I think this week's going to be pretty simple for you, and that's all we're doing. What we will do next week is oligopoly. That is a new chapter. That's chapter 9. And that's it.